Thank you, everybody, for turning up on the second last day at 3 p.m. May I request those who are here to settle down, please? Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon. I'm Shuchi, and I am hopefully going to take you through the next 1 hour smoothly and not with any word salad from my end. Thank God I don't have to speak much, but I am really happy to kick off this session on resilience measurement and evidence, and this has really been a journey for us, and I'd like Nate Matthews, our CEO, to kick us off, please.
Thank you so much, Suchi, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is my last session that I'm doing at COP. I'm off on a jet plane tomorrow morning, but in many ways, this is also one of the most important. As many of you will have seen, the global goal on adaptation was released around 9 a.m. this morning. And in that, we saw resilience mentioned multiple times. But unless we really build the evidence for that and make sure that resilience is substantiated, then it will just be a buzzword in another big UN document. So that's why I'm really thrilled to be speaking at this session. GRP is a partnership of around 80 organizations. We were established in 2014, so almost 10 years ago. And we work across scaling on-the-ground innovation, supporting, advancing and brokering knowledge, and engaging in policy. And the importance of measurement, I think, and evidence really can't be underestimated. It's often an area that's not that exciting, so not a lot of people are working on it, but it is fundamental to drive investment and action in resilience and adaptation. And so we've been working with a fantastic set of partners over the last few years to really build out the evidence base, support it, and nurture it along. And in June this year, we brought together 1,000 people online and 200 in person for what was the biggest ever gathering of evidence and measurement practitioners in Cape Town. Many of the people here were in the room and others online. And it was just a demonstration of the diversity of evidence and the fantastic work that's going on already. But also how much more we need to come together as a group and the importance of partnership to navigate the complexity of resilience evidence. And so there's a lot going on in the resilience space, but I should also mention that there is still a huge gap, as many of you will know, in terms of funding. And the only way I really feel to unlock that funding is to build out more robust evidence and measurement. And so, again, this is why I think this session is so critical. So just a few highlights from that report before I pass over to the panelists who have many more insights than I will ever have. But one is, just really thinking around what resilience evidence is good enough. So really what counts? I think that's a really key question when we're thinking about evidence. And just because there's so many diversity of evidence, and also when we have to think about evidence, it has to be useful not just for the funders, the donors, but it also has to be useful for the communities on the ground, because they're the ones who are being often asked to provide the information that feeds into it or perhaps even collect it themselves. So I think that's really fundamental from my perspective. The second key highlight from the report, and please, I would encourage you to download it and read it if you haven't already. It's up on various websites, including GRP's. Is just thinking about who are the evidence users and producers and what gaps do they have in their evidence. And that's really thinking about how we can help fill those gaps in ways that are, again, have utility for everyone. And also it's ensuring that evidence meets I've already got that one, sorry. Combining, so one of the key highlights from the report was also how we're thinking about combining asset building with asset protection. So when we think about resilience evidence, it might be having like an insurance product that actually allows the asset that's built to be protected during a shock or stress, and that allows the implementation of resilience building to sustain beyond that shock or stress that we're seeing so often face communities. And then the last one is just really how we collect, analyze, and mobilize this enormous evidence base. And I think that's also a real challenge for all of us. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is in partnership. And that's why it's so great to have some fantastic partners on the panel. But I would also encourage you, we have the Resilience Evidence Coalition that we convene within GRP. We have many hundreds of members within that. And the purpose of that is to bring together the practitioners and people working on evidence and measurement, so we can actually share the knowledge and move this forward together, so we can ensure that things like the Global Goal on Adaptation, which came out this morning, and the many other uses of resilience have substance, and that we get more investment and action in this space, which is so critical because, as we know, resilience and adaptation are where people meet climate and also ecosystems for sure as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to Suchi, and I'm really looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Next, we have Salma Kadiri. She's from USAID Morocco and works as a program specialist there. Salma, please come to the floor. I'm not going to introduce people very elaborately, but please come to the floor and share your thoughts from your perspective as a donor, but also an implementer. You can take the mic here. Would you like to take the... That's fine, yeah, go ahead. I mean, it's up to you, really.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really, first of all, thank you for the invitation, Suchi. It's a great privilege for me to be here among this panel and have the chance to talk and share with you our approach, evidence-based approach we adopted in USAID Morocco to design a climate-led action project. Actually, this project, our mission contributed to the Forum of Evidence-Based organized by Global Partnership, and we're thrilled that we can follow on with this participation here in this panel. So our project aims to build the resilience of local communities which are facing climate change, multiple and interconnected challenges related to climate change, be it water scarcity, floods, desertification, coastal erosion, etc., leading to low agriculture production, but also decline in economic growth and more vulnerability. So, in response to these threats, we went through a whole process of design using evidence-based approach, but also human-centered and participatory approach to assess the needs, identify the gaps, but also identify opportunities and measure risks. And with this approach, we were able to identify 5 key priorities. Next slide, please. The first one is to work to improve the resilience of the communities, local communities, on water, drought, floods, etc. We will also be supporting them to strengthen their resilience, especially for the communities living in arid and rural areas. And here we're talking about more about women, youth, and other vulnerable populations. We'll be also working on catalyzing more systemic change to allow more meaningful participation of women and girls in climate action. This is a critical objective for us. And we'll be also increasing the adoption of resilient agriculture practices, including smart agriculture, but also water conservation. Last of our priority we identified is to increase the participation of women and young girls in advocacy and climate action in Morocco. Next slide, please. So also something before diving into to explain to you what approach we adopted, I would like to mention, I think it's worth to mention here that our priorities are aligned with the first ever USG strategy for gender and equality, equity and equality. And also we align with the global US strategy in terms of the objective to partner with countries to help them improve their systems and allow more women and girls to play a more meaningful role on the climate action. For me, what's personally matter, and I always keep in mind the example of Badia. It's the lady you see in the panel. She's one of our beneficiaries of a cash grant program in partnership with Give Directly. She's president of a cooperative, and she lives in a mountain region in Morocco. Thanks to her participation, we could really realize the importance of supporting more of these courageous ladies in defining local solutions to the climate change, but also helping them improve their environments, as they are the one who detain the cultural heritage, and also, as Badia used to say, they are the backbone of our societies. Next slide, please. So yeah, now this is the most important part. This busy slide, it shows actually our journey for designing this locally led climate change project, which is still ongoing, I would say. So overall, we embraced the engaging and listening and also learning with local with the diverse stakeholder, from local communities to government. And this, thanks to this approach, we were able to collect immense data set, which is shaping our vision for this design and climate change. Briefly, the approach was first to establish, and this is really important, an inclusive design team. And I'm really thrilled because I have two members of the design team with me in the room. Thank you, Mariam, and thank you, Alona, for joining me. With this participatory approach, we've been able to reach and engage stakeholders, to inform our requests for information to the whole industry. Then we invited and helped government, experts, scientists, private sector, to hear from them their perspectives on the climate change, but also help initiate dialogue between them regarding these areas of climate change. And to complement this effort, we also completed a listening tour to go in more remote areas in Morocco, diverse geographic areas, and engage and hear from more than 1,400 persons, either through focus group or interviews, especially local communities, and understand their need and perspective. Yeah, and we still have another analysis, gender analysis, that's ongoing, that will finish soon. Next slide, please. Basically, for us, the evidence-based approach is a continuous process of learning from our successes, from failures, and also improve our practices using several tools, either a feedback loop with participants to understand their aspiration and reality. We also try to maintain proximity to hear directly from them as much as possible, try to apply a knowledge management principle, and finally, focus on internal and external communications. Next slide, please. So we believe that the use of this evidence base will help us ultimately to adapt policies, either at the government level or at the programmatic level. We also, these evidence and data measurement will help shift the power to the local actors, which is one of our major objective under this project, and allow them to be in the driver's seat. Finally, we think also that this approach will help us channel more assistance directly to the local communities and support them in their advocacy endeavor and their leadership. Next slide, please. Yeah, just something to mention here that it's not the first time for USAID Morocco embracing the evidence approach, evidence-based approach. We used it also for the cash grant program with Give Directly. And here just showing some examples of other cash grant program that use intensively the evidence-based approach, either in the US or Burkina Faso or Kenya or other places. With this, I hand the floor to you, Suchi. Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. That was amazing and a fairly refreshing take on what it could look like. Next, I would like to invite Tulika on the screen, please. Tulika is the Vice President at Mathematica. And hi, Tulika. Your slides will be up on the screen, but you can continue talking about them and you can share them, actually, yeah. Perfect. So you can share your slides and talk through them as you go, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Just want to make sure everything is set up okay. Can you see my slides fine? Okay, so assuming everything is working, so much, Shuchi, for inviting me, and Nathaniel and everyone in the GRP for creating such a vibrant and collaborative community. Of course, talking about measurement comes naturally to us at Mathematica. That's our focus, to provide evidence-based policy support. But just as I was setting up this slide, I felt like both the speakers before me set it up really well. Natalian just talked about the importance of evidence generation. I just want to break that down a little bit in the context of how we define climate resilience, which is the ability to maintain and improve current and future well-being in the face of climate stresses and shocks. It is clearly important to
Tulika?
set up. Yes.
Tulika, sorry to interrupt you, but I think you're sharing the wrong screen. All we can see is a black screen right now.
Oh, that's weird. 1 second.
Now we can see your slides. Thank you.
You can? Okay, thank you. I didn't really do anything, but somehow it worked. All right, so hopefully you can see that. So yeah, in terms of evaluations are really vital, right, to essentially understand what works. And that is super important for us to get the climate finance that we need for financing climate adaptation interventions, to channel them. You spoke about, what can we do today to understand what kinds of interventions will be most impactful and for designing them? And this does not have to be like a predictive quantitative analysis, as you mentioned, bringing the community together, understanding the parameters and helping design impactful interventions. And ongoing monitoring, which is super important to make sure that we are getting the feedback loop, understanding what is working and adjusting the programs, all of which is vital to increasing climate resilience. And so just going on to the next slide, just want to talk a little bit about what affects resilience and to highlight the complexity of factors that affect it, because that again influences what you would measure. So if you put the individual at the center of it, we know that multiple systems affect the individual's well-being, the access to health, access to education, your access to social capital, access to finance, ecological systems. And the resilience of all of those systems to climate change will also impact your individual's climate resilience. And I'm separating those two things very importantly, because we have interventions that are ongoing to improve community resilience, system resilience for health systems, and so forth. And these factors mediate what happens when the climate shocks and stressors happen. And that mediation affects how the individual actually does in terms of their current and future well-being. That means when I'm going to measure climate resilience, I must have a good understanding and measurement of the factors that will affect resilience. I must have a way to measure the severity and duration of climate events, and also an equally strong measure of the well-being indicators, which should be defined collaboratively with the community and individuals, and how do they measure and how would they describe their well-being. But in any case, all of those elements have to be measured and understood. And I would emphasize the importance of qualitative analysis to really understand which factors are critical and vital to the community and individuals. So that makes measuring climate resilience somewhat challenging, because if you go back, okay, I'm approving, Sophie, your request to the screen. Are we doing okay on the slides? I got a request, so I want to make sure that, so just go back up.
You are doing fine, Tulika. We can see your slides. Can you hear us? Tulika, can you hear us?
Okay, so, I'm not able to see the presentation. So
we
just
can
let me.
hear you now. We can hear you now.
I'm not
we
sure
lost
which
you for a
slide
bit.
you're on.
You're on slide 4. The audience is awesome here.
So assuming that people have a view of the slides, and even if not, I'll just continue just so that we don't lose time, because things that I'm saying don't necessarily need a slide backup. So just going back to the measurement of definition of climate resilience, since it's the ability to recover, what it implies is that it's a very dynamic concept, which implies that we need multiple data points. And because we have to determine the well-being in the face of climate shock, it means that a climate event must occur, and we must be able to observe and measure.
We'll move to the next speaker and see if we can come back to Tulika in a bit to save time. So next, I would like to jump the process of measurement and look at a very diverse approach, something very, very diverse, and invite Pradeep here. Pradeep is from Nepal, and he is the winner of the Knowledge into Use grants that we gave out after the Resilience Evidence Forum for putting evidence into use. And I'll let Pradeep describe his work. Pradeep, over to you.
Yeah, if I can get the slide. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for organizing this event, very important event, and inviting me to speak. I'm honored to present one of the initiatives that we are doing in Nepal, which is on this art-based approach for risk communication in Nepal. Nepal, as you see, is a multi-hazard country. So there is a scare in data sets. There are lots of issues in, like bringing everything together. So now we do have a system. The system is working fine. There is data sets, there is system, there is governance, structure, but also we are failing to reach out to the most vulnerable communities. And we are looking into ways through which we can reach out to the people who actually needs to understand about climate or disaster risks. Let me start with next slide, with the brief introduction of Youth Innovation Lab. Youth Innovation Lab is a not-for-profit civic tech. We call it civic tech because we want to blend this approach of not-for-profit company as well as the tech company. So we are the mix of both. And we work in the domain, disaster risk reduction and climate change system development primarily, and also in localization and other specific targets as well. Next slide. So we developed, next slide. So we developed the Integrated Disaster Information Management System for the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of Nepal. That was, if you click next, then you will see the presentations. Just next. No, back. You just click next, and there should be a slide. Okay, so it showcases how we are, trying to simplify the risk communication informations. So what it includes is that it includes the maps, stories, and the interventions that government should understand. For example, if you portray a map or GIS map, and then if you give it to the government, so it will be very difficult for them to understand because it includes geographic information, a lot of information, scientific information they need to understand. We thought we simplified this information for the government, but still we were lacking because they were finding hard to understand it and forget about reaching out to the local communities or people to the ground. So after development of this platform, so we thought even we have to simplify this approach and we have to go to the ground. And then we start this, next slide. We start this approach of engaging young people. Previous slide. Engaging young people to teach them knowledge of spatial knowledge about maps, how they recognize the most vulnerable areas through, maps or arts. And we worked with a school where 700 students, studies there, and we taught them to figure out what exactly is the risk areas they are living with. And we try to use the model of 100 years return period map of that municipality. And we ask them where they belong. And we ask them to pinpoint that location so that they understand what kind of, risks they actually stays in. Next slide. So we used two approaches. One was through the storytelling approaches, like we led them to explore, to portray their experiences in the maps or in the arts. So we asked them to draw their experiences through our arts, and we compiled them and then helped them develop a comprehensive, picture of that municipality. Because when they talk about innovations, their experiences, they were showing in the form of arts, what are the pain points they were going through. And also they taught us what kind of innovations in practices. For example, they told us they have this self-sheltered. They showed us they have this early warning system working. They showed us in the form of arts the early warning messages they have seen. And these things were portrayed on that. And after that, what we did in the next slide, with the support of the government and all three tiers of the government, we developed this map. So this map includes a lot of information. So if you see, this is almost like a GIS platform. This is the first mural we have seen, being portrayed on the form of arts. And this includes legend. If you see the legend, so it portrays the level of the risks, and we were asking students to compare this with their heights. Probably they were smaller than 1 meter. And if you see that municipality, that is the municipality map on the middle. And it shows that 90% of municipalities can be inundated and has been inundated in large extent as well. So when they knew this information, they got aware, like what message they should communicate to their parents and what they need to be aware of. And also we put some of the critical informations like hotline informations where they should respond, some of the websites they should explore during the time of crisis, and also how we are bringing these informations. And also you can see the sources of these informations as well. Next slide. So now, with the support of this GRP award, so we are taking these approaches to a nearby municipality. So if you see that the one in the art form right now, so this is the municipality we want to work on. And now we want to change a slight approach of implementation as well. So we want to target not municipality, not school right now, to the municipality where a lot of people come as a customer, and we want to approach them through this art approaches. So I think, like it's complex to communicate science, and we are exploring day by day. We thought we are going to work on technology development, and we ended up in arts. I'm not sure like where we are heading, but then we are yet to experiment a lot of activities. Thank you so much for having and listening.
Thanks, Pradeep. Your last statement was fairly telling of how people need to react to measurement approaches. With that, next I'd like to invite John Choptiani from IDE to share something about the measurement approach that they use.
Thank you very much. My name is John Choptiani. I'm the Vice President of Programs of the technical teams at IDE. IDE is an NGO. We're based in the UK, the US, and Canada, and we have offices in 11 countries. And yeah, okay. It's really hard to see the slides from over here. So maybe. No, it is on. Okay. Thank you. I can see the slide, and hopefully you can as well. So today I'm going to talk about IDE's Market Systems Resilience Index. There are many different tools out there on resilience measurement, and we have one more. And I want to talk a little bit about ours as one example, but also to talk about what this means a little bit in the broader sense of why does it matter. So certainly it matters to understand what you're measuring, what you're working, is it working at all? Can you measure it before and afterwards? But also, what do you do with that information? So as a smallholder farmer or someone living in a community or a project manager, so what if you have low resilience? What do you do with that? You have a score of 3 out of 5, 7 out of 10. What do I do with that? And we don't have all the answers, but that's something that we're trying to explore. So I'll give one example of this and then talk us through that. Next slide, please. So we look at resilience at the market system level. So what that means is we try to map a system in a market. We look at traditionally focus a lot on farmers, producers, but also the next several levels up. Depends how deep and thick the market is. But the input suppliers, the extension agents, the retailers, and potentially exporters. And we recognize that no one person is an island, and their resilience is largely based on those around them and the whole wider system. So we do look at the individual resilience of each of those actors, but also the larger system as a whole. And we try to look at this so we can understand how to adapt our projects and to improve them over time. So it is really a dynamic system, which is really key. There are lots of tools out there that look at one component, and while that is beneficial, there's only so much you can do with one level of the system. Next slide, please. So there is no way to know what is the perfect measurement of resilience. There is no perfect tool that you can compare this and say this is 98% correct, or this other tool is only 50%. We're all trying to make tools and approaches and frameworks more accurate, but there is no perfect to compare that to. So I want to recognize that we don't think that we have it perfect either, but we are continually working to improve this. So we're trying to show a little bit of the network we have here. We've divided resilience into principles. We have structure, connectivity, support, environment, and financial. And then we have 11 determinants. Things look like redundancy, diversity, inclusion, feedback loops, physical environment, financial viability. And then we break those down further, and then we break those down further into questions, et cetera. So at the end of the day, this is a survey where we try to measure each of those in a qualitative and quantitative way so that we can get a measurement at scale, both to see individuals, but also trends and patterns between, over time. Because when you go into a community where you're designing a project, you say, okay, yes, we know this community has water scarcity problems. So you design a project around that, and that's great. But if you really delve into the details, maybe it's only the elders that have that problem, or maybe it's only on people on this side of the river, or that side of the river, or these types of people. So understanding that nuance can really make a project or interventions or engagement with the government much more nuanced and hopefully much more powerful, because people are very diverse. So it's important to understand that trade-off of qualitative approaches where it's very participatory and engaging, and that can be much richer, but it takes a long time. You can also do high-level resilience where it's very few questions, you're doing it at millions of people, but then you're losing the nuance, the depth. So we haven't cracked that perfectly, but we try to look at somewhere in the middle where we get a little bit of that depth. One of the things we do with this is to combine it with human-centered design. So we'll do this this more quantitative approach with MSRI first, and then we'll find some interesting tidbits of these people have different levels of resilience, and then we'll send in our team of experts who do much more participatory work and engage with focus group discussions, in-depth deep dives, and understand what does it mean to be low resilience in enabling environment or inclusion, and then we try to design our projects from there. Next slide, please. So as I said, we can look at things at different scale. We can give we use MSRI on a scale of 0 to 5. So in this example here, we have overall in the very middle, it's 2.18. What does that mean? It's a way to simplify and aggregate the resilience levels. But you can break it down further into the different components, the principles and the determinants, and see where there's high levels of resilience and low level of resilience, and then delve into that, and then we can really go into the data much more in depth and have a much greater detail on this. But if you do that at the super hyper local level, it's really hard to say, to compare across areas. So we try to look at things at multiple levels, and particularly looking at, we might see another area that has a very high level of resilience, and that might be interesting. We want to learn why this area has high resilience, and we want to look at areas that have low resilience to see what's not working there. Typically, we want to look at those outliers and see what's the interesting element of that. Next slide, please. So here's just a quick slide to show where we're working in IDE and with MSRI. So we've been using MSRI in these countries, some of them for over 3 years. We're about to start the 4th round. So we are looking at changes over time. One of the big unknowns about resilience is how long it takes to build it, and would you know it once you are quote unquote resilient? So we challenge ourselves to understand how often should you be doing an assessment? Is it every week, every day, every month, every 5 years? How long does it take to build resilience, and can you see changes in resilience over certain periods? So we do try to do it on an annual basis when we can, depending on funding. But that gives us a sense of when a shock happens, what kind of areas of resilience go down and which ones stay the same, and where we can build, and then look across these. So what we're interested in is doing this for ourselves, certainly. We find it very interesting, it helps our programming. But also, we know we don't have a perfect tool. There are many other tools out there. We're very interested in partnering with others, both in the academic sector and other implementing partners, et cetera, to really understand what they're seeing as well, because this is a huge amount of data. Each of the surveys for each individual is around 100 questions. We can skip some depending on the responses. And we do this in the hundreds and thousands. So we have a lot of data points that we can compare, and that's really interesting to mine that data. We certainly don't want to sell that data, but for academic purposes, mining that and understanding where the correlations, where the different elements is really interesting. So I put that out as a sort of open offer that if there are others that want to collaborate and share information, we'd be very happy to do that for the better of all of us. Next slide, please. So I'll just go through an example from Mozambique, where we had a recent MSRI session, and we tried to use MSRI along with other data sets to really look at reflecting on what we were working on and try to pivot and have almost like a midterm evaluation and adapt the project to what we've found so far. So here we say we're combining the MSRI tool with our human-centered design, so we have adaptive management. So what we call it is a pause and reflect section. We had this with USAID, USAID projects, and with our partners. Next slide, please. Over a couple days, we had people reviewing the information from MSRI and elsewhere to really understand what was working and what wasn't, and then redesign the project. Because when you design a project, by the time it gets funded, things have changed. You may not have known the context well enough. By then, the whole thing has changed. So having an opportunity to step back, review what's working, what's not, and then refining the project is really important. That is very difficult based on most timelines of projects and donors, but is something that we're advocating for, and we try to push where we can because we see it much more valuable. You're never going to get the proposal perfect. So either it wasn't designed perfect, which is usually partly the case, but also the context changes. So what we did is we tried to look at MSRI among other data sources, both qualitative and informal, formal, et cetera, and then reflected, talked about what was working, what wasn't, trying to decide what can we do with this, and then refining our implementation strategy. So this was part of our Feed the Future Resilient Coastal Communities project. It was 2 days, and we refined that. And we do have our chief of party from that project here, if anyone wants to speak with them in more detail about this process. He's that guy over there. Next slide, please. So a couple just quick examples from this pause and reflect session. So just to give you a sense of what kind of things we looked at and found, the team found interesting, because these are just numbers, but at the end of the day, these are people and communities and such. So what we found was we needed to revamp our Youth Accelerator curriculum and really linking the youth. That was an area that we didn't emphasize strongly enough at first. And working with women fish aggregators to help them with skills training and connect them with other women groups. And trying to make sure that we are working cross-team, cross-thematic areas so that there was better collaboration. Our partners, as often the case at the beginning of a project, may have worked together a little bit, but after a year or two, you start to work together a lot more and then recognize what can work and what not. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, one of the things we are doing, we're continually looking to improve and refine MSRI. As I said, we mostly look at the producer level, so farmers essentially. But we are developing other elements of MSRI, so adapting it to the WASH context, to more micro enterprise and coastal communities. But one of the areas that I think is really key, and Nate touched on this a little bit, is the so what. So you end up getting one of those scores, and what does that mean for someone who's been assessed as having a 2.18 or a 3.5? Thanks. What do I do with that? They might get the information, but there's the next step, and the traditional answer is, okay, well, we're going to write a proposal, and in maybe 3 or 5 years we'll come back and we'll have funding, and hopefully we'll be able to help you. And that's deeply disappointing for everyone involved. So where possible, we look at trying to change projects, but that's really difficult for project managers, for implementers, for the farmers themselves. If you find out your inclusion resilience level is very low, you might be a market specialist or you might be a gender specialist. What are you supposed to do with that? As a project manager in the field in rural northern Mozambique, you're not an expert in everything. I'm certainly not an expert here. That's very difficult. So what we want to do is build out what we're calling our resilience recommendation table, which is essentially using evidence-based approach to looking at what has worked to build resilience and then tying that to different elements of the resilience from MSRI. So if there's an area that is low, we're trying to build the evidence of what can improve that. Partly from our own resources, as we do this over time, we're starting to build evidence and in at least correlations, if not pure evidence, but also looking elsewhere to try to prepare materials for the project manager so it becomes certainly not automated because it will need to be adapted to the context, but at least put more tools and information in the hands of these project managers so that they can say, well, maybe it's a farmer field school that would help this the most, or maybe it's a cash transfer or some other activity. But it means that they can have that at their fingertips, not just say, well, okay, what do I do now that I see the financial inclusion is low, help me. But trying to make that a bit more systematic, because when you're talking resilience, you're not talking one little sector, it is the breadth of their livelihood and beyond just the financial aspect, but their home life, their social skills, etc. So that is quite huge. So that's something we're looking at, and we'd love to partner with others. And with that, I think I will close here and say thank you very much.
Thanks, John. You can keep sitting there, and maybe I can invite Pradeep and Salma on the stage, please. And we have about 5 minutes for quick questions or reflections. I know it's the end of the day, and you all might be tired, but I just wanted to give the audience a chance if there's any thoughts, questions.
Director of WOCAN, Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. And yes, I'm a gurung, for those of you. We measure women's empowerment with a standard that we created, the W+ standard. So we're looking at metrics of empowerment. And part of the exercise we've been doing with some support from the Gates Foundation was looking at women's organizations and other support organizations that are supporting women's groups in adaptation, right? And one of the things we started to hear from them was the one activity they know that's had the greatest impact is the formation of groups. And I refer to this in IDE, where you talk about the cooperation. But they said that the biggest problem they have is their donors don't fund that activity, right? So donors are just funding activities for drip irrigation or something like that. And I wondered if you had any reflections on the funding of the kind of activities that are needed for that. Thanks.
Salma, do you want to take that?
Okay, that's a great question, actually. The program I was mentioned earlier, Cash Grant, actually, that we're implementing in partnership with Give Directly, is recognizing the work of cooperatives, what we call cooperatives in Morocco. These are legal entities formed by a group of people, mostly women. In our case, we encourage women-led cooperative, and we work much more with them. There is a way to work directly and fund these cooperatives. It's definitely, we use these direct cash programs to this cooperative. This one approach. The idea, the first iteration of this program actually was we were directing these funding to households or individuals on first place, because actually this model for cash grant to groups, its first adaptation we did with Give Directly. It was first ever adopted. Actually, it's a interesting study case, because first the intervention was meant to support individuals to become resilient to the shock of COVID on first place. Then we had a lot of resistance from mainly the government towards direct cash grants to individuals. So we start discussions, negotiation, and also totally a redesign of the program in order to ensure that our support is reaching to these vulnerable communities, mostly women, directly with direct funds. But the way that we fund and agree with the government is to support cooperatives. In Morocco, very small cooperatives are very important part of the socio-economic fabrics. They're really productive. It's activity generative activities, most importantly, it touched several sectors in Morocco, either handicraft, agriculture, and tourism, etc. So we were able, after 2 years of implementations, to reach out to more 1,430, I would say, cooperatives, reaching more than 9,000 people. 52% of them are women. The model is that there are several operations. Just to give you an idea, we call for applications among these cooperatives, and they submit their business plan, what they intend to do with this cash, the funding. And then we go through a process of selection with several government program and other stakeholders to make sure we selecting the most viable cooperatives and who will make good use of the funding. Then we do some due diligence, etc., on the field, but also remotely. And we disperse the first tranche. We do follow-up. We gather data. We have surveys, so we can really make sure that there is the funds are invested accordingly with the business plan. And then we also proceed with the second tranche if the first tranche is successful. So I think it's a good model, and it's something we encourage. We're happy to share the information and data about this and to replicate this model elsewhere. Thank you.
I think the selection process of like the projects from the donor side sometimes rely on, as there was one presentations where they mentioned that it will not be timely when the project goes to the execution. So and there will be a lot of like steps to change that implementation strategies as well. So that will sometimes become outdated when the implementation phase starts. So I think there should be a kind of flexibility in terms of implementation on that. So as a grassroots level organizations, what we think sometimes is that the priority that we understand from the ground is not linked with the priorities of the donors. And that makes a lot of complications. For example, I was in this place, Razapur, where this flood mural was done. What we figured out is that the building code that our government is now, like asking, that is so expensive for people living there to actually follow. It will be very expensive for them to build a house that costs more than $30,000. And that's where, like we lack innovations and how we can come up with affordable housing solutions for those kind of peoples, and also meet the government guidelines as well. Otherwise, the government does not recognize the houses. Also, it cannot go through the insurance policies, and there will be a lot of laggings as well. So I think the priorities has to be integrated, and also it's not sometimes like just gender or certain right-based issues. Sometimes we have to see a comprehensive picture, and I think working with the grassroots level organization and coordination with the local government is one of the key things I would suggest.
Do you have any quick reflection on this?
Just really quickly, I would say that the funding is not necessarily the issue. More money is typically better, but what we find is often a challenge is setting out those really detailed implementation plans at the beginning. There needs to be more of a mechanism of refining and adapting that throughout the lifespan of a project. You can't know everything in advance, and also things change. So while more funding is certainly typically better, it's often the rules, and I recognize I used to be on the donor side. There needs to be audits, there needs to be financial safeguards, that all makes sense. But having more of a mechanism to have more adaptation throughout the lifespan of a project, so that as you learn more, you can put money from this bucket or this line into another line. I think that is almost more important as you learn that maybe that's where it should be best used.
Great, thank you. I also want to acknowledge that Tulika is on the line. Tulika, hi. Sorry we lost you at a point where you were talking, but I guess we'll continue these conversations. This is not the first or the last session where we are talking about resilience, evidence, and measurement. I'm aware that we have 5 minutes more, and I wanted to invite Sunita to give the final closing synthesis of all that was discussed today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Suchi. Yeah, sorry, usually when you close, you try and make something very profound. I'm not sure if I'll make that. I'll try and keep it pragmatic. So I was involved, as with David, who just now left for another meeting. We were involved in the multiple values assessment of IBES. And some of the ideas that you've been, I mean, all the work that you've been doing fits so well. This is like operationalizing all that we've been speaking in that. But just a little bit to zoom out and see, like one of the two important things that we really emphasized was when we start doing this assessment, a measurement exercise, it's about the purpose. Why are we doing this exercise? What is it that we are trying to change, right? And we are, of course, the whole goal for us in this community is to achieve this thing of Nebulous concept of sustainability. And so, but then what is sustainability? So are we looking at futures? It's not just one future, but people have different priorities. There are so many actors. And it should be just, it should be sustainable. And we can have multiple pathways to get there. How do we measure this? How do we get there? And that's so core. Now, for instance, the next global assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services is coming, and I'm looking at the data that you guys have generated, and that's something that can actually be used in highlighting better, no? Because some of these issues have been raised. It's about these multiple values, different stakeholders possess, the worldviews they have. It's not just about what we call the instrumental values, that you put something, you get something out of it, it's just a service we get from nature, and we have to address a particular problem. No, it goes much, much more deeper. It's about socio-cultural values, it's about the rights of people, and all of this needs to be captured if we are talking about justice and equity. And that's very, very important, and as we know in the discourses here. This is very encouraging to see such extensive, exhaustive efforts are being made, and they are laudable, and it'll be nice to see how we can integrate this into global assessment processes, because you have these data sets, which it's nice that a platform like this exists, but it's also good for people like us to see that this is happening so we can, reach out to follow up on this. The other thing that I wanted to raise was, we speak, in this forum, we speak a lot about climate resilience, yes, but all that if you look at it, it gets much more deeper into the drivers, right? Or it's the underlying factors, and then it gets into nature. So it is a systemic approach, and that's been highlighted, but it's also looking at resilience from a socio-ecological systems approach. It's looking at both sides, or it's one system. And we have to look at how do we intervene together so that we have better, we have to move towards a transformative change, because we are looking to change, but to change, we have to transform the ways we are doing things, and what things are we doing, and where are those? So you had a nice list of all of those, or all of you had those, like areas that you're targeting, and it goes all the way from soil, from the environment and various, and like the various resources that are out there. That's not just for climate. I mean, climate is an outcome that we're looking at, but it's for livelihoods, it's for food security. Everything is entrenched at that level. And the point you made about the incoherence between policy goals and local priorities, I think that's an important thing to note, because it's again linked to different cultural outlooks. But it's also what is important at various scales. And we should be cognizant of that scale diversity so that we can make some, our interventions, the way we measure, the way we value, it resonates with that, with what's appropriate at that scale. I'll stop there. Thanks, Ruchi.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience online and everyone in the room for joining us today afternoon. And I guess a big thanks to the tech team and the events team. Thank you for putting this together and helping us through this. That's it. Thank you. And please keep in touch we do have the Resilience Evidence Coalition that we talked about. So please do reach out to us. And we are happy to talk more about it and happy to steward this process of further learning around resilience evidence and measurement. Thank you.